Hello, guys. Welcome to the final chapter of this three-part series where we were discussing the top earning companies globally of 2022. And before we start, please share, subscribe, and like. We'd love for you to subscribe also, and also so that we can be motivated to keep on giving you this content, and also critique and leave something nice for us there so that also we can know where to improve and know if you're doing the right we know if to know if you can improve and know where to correct. Last time we discussed 7 of the top companies. Chapter 1 we did 3 of them. The next chapter we did 4 of them, and today we're gonna do the final 3. So without further ado, I think we'll just start from where we left it. The numbers, number 8 institution that's in the top 10 of 2020. It's the Agricultural Bank of China. Yeah. The Agricultural Bank of China is an agricultural bank, but it deals with financing and through commercial loans, financing projects. But with the name Agricultural Bank of China, you can clearly hear that it's an agricultural bank. Its revenue is 181 billion in the year 2022, and its its profit is that 7 billion, and the asset that the bank controls is 4.6 trillion. So 4.6 trillion is a very big number. If I was to equate it to a country, the GDP of Britain is 2 trillion, the GDP of Germany is 3 trillion, the GDP of Japan is 4 trillion. So this bank alone, the assets are almost the GDP of Japan because it's between 4 to 5 trillion. So, this is, it gets me thinking. That's why you can see, especially if you live in Africa and Kenya, you can clearly see why even our agricultural sector is really struggling to compete, because a bank like this, it's on the spearheading of investing and promoting programs in China that are agriculture based. A fish from where I stay is a fish from China. A fish from China is way cheaper. Garlic is from China. A lot of things come from China, and Chinese now have taken over the agricultural sector. And I'm not saying they are in a bad way, but I'm just pointing out how they are very hardworking, and they understand how the game is played, and they're playing it very well. And apart from this, they also manufacture farming equipment, drip line, greenhouse papers, polythene papers, sprinklers, all these systems that we need to irrigate sufficiently. Fertilizer, China is also a big manufacturer of fertilizer. So if you look at this thing, you can clearly see where China is. I don't know if you want to add something, Joe, on that.
Yeah, like we spoke about, we've spoken about 2 banks from China, China Construction Bank and ICBC. And if you look at all these banks, they have something in common, whereby they have a huge support from the government. The population itself, they support these banks by paying back loans, saving in those banks, building the financial credit in those banks. And you look at, an agricultural bank of China, funding up to, probably millions and millions of farmers. It has assets worth of 4.5 trillion. That shows how big and how much influence this bank has, and how much it cares. Despite making profits, it still, it still cares about its source of income. It cares that China should be the #1 producer of all the agricultural produce in the world.
When I'm looking at this list, since you said we have now 3 banks in China, from China, and each of them are they've taken a major asset in a country ecosystem. One is controlling the agriculture sector, the other one is controlling the construction sector, the other one is controlling the manufacturing and the commercial and industrial sector. And that just shows you how Chinese are very, they are very organized, and you can see them in how they're doing their own things. And if you look at these banks' combined asset of these three banks, it comes close to 15 trillion. 15 trillion.
15 trillion. That's the GDP of almost the GDP
Europe.
of almost
Europe
the
is
whole of China.
Yeah, Europe is 17 trillion GDP.
Yeah, 17 trillion, the whole of Europe.
Yeah.
And those are three banks combined. If they decided they wanted to come and buy Europe, you know, if it was cash exchange, they probably would have been able to buy, you know, probably the economy. If an economy was for sale, they would buy the economy of Europe and control it.
And control it.
And this is where I see how China are really aggressive. Because even if you don't see Huawei and you know, okay, they're down the list, but even if you don't see Huawei and Chinese technology companies, their financial system is so efficient that it competes with companies that have been there longer than them. Because agricultural bank, you know, it shows it's a very powerful. You know, these guys are really working very hard. Agricultural bank although it was founded much later on, but still it was founded in 1951. But still, they are rich. They hold you know, the assets.
And you know, people also
the way they maneuver.
And you know, also people talk about the Netherlands. You know, Netherlands is a big agricultural country. You know, the Americans, the Cargills, but looking at this list, I think the Chinese literally are one of the, if not controlling the agricultural sector in the world. You know, they are like controlling, because even pesticides, you know, even these days, Chinese have even entered the pesticide game. They are competing with German companies in terms of manufacturing pesticides for the plants. In seed technology, you know, the seeds that we're using to plant, you know, the other video just saying how they're even planting in desert. Yeah, and
you see that China, you know, we just see the face, you know, the faces they produce, the products they produce. But when you go into the background of China, when you start investigating, these guys invest heavily in scientists. They invest heavily in you know, people with PhDs. You're talking just now. You're saying your friend told you a normal class in China has people with 4 master's degrees. You know, people are very, very competitive, even within China. It doesn't mean, so it means that within China, it's probably even more competitive than the US. You know, because these guys have an immense amount of knowledge, an immense amount of, you know how to do things. Because you know, a country like US has been in the know-how business for a very long time, but China, they've started adapting different scientific methods, you know, chip manufacturing, semiconductor manufacturing, things that were discovered in Europe and America much earlier than discovered in China. And China now is
the leader,
improving heavily on the indication system, making people, you know, by 10 years old, you're probably in high school. By 16, you're in university. By 21, you're a PhD graduate. You know, by 30, you've discovered a whole bunch of chemicals, semiconductors, chips, you know. And by the time you're 60, you know, now you've defeated any other race.
And you know, they also say
any other country.
The Chinese even education system is very intense. It's very, very intense, even for the locals.
Very intense.
It's like you're in a military camp. You know, you're expected to perform. You know, A's, no. You know, and it's not that kind of just
still,
cramming. It's more you know,
understanding. Yeah, and if you look at their TikTok, you read articles saying Chinese TikTok is for kids. For kids, it's just experiments, and then they're forced to do the experiments. You know, their playtime is doing experiments. Their playtime is, you know, making things on the computer. You know, figuring out how mechanics works, how chemistry works, how biology works. You know, even you might find even by the time someone is done with school in China, they're already absorbed into very high positions. You know, they're making very big decisions. They're making, you know, even discovering how to plant plants in the desert. You know, that probably something that came from a group of young Chinese, you know, geniuses. And Chinese is producing more geniuses than any other country in the world. Because most of other countries, you know, we are relaxed. We are just enjoying life. You know, Chinese are working, burning the midnight oil. They're constantly, you know, observing and learning. And they're learning 10 times more probably than any other race, any other country in the world.
Okay. I think we should go to the next one, which is number 9.
Bank of America.
Yeah, Bank of America. And you know, it's an investment management. It's like more of like JP Morgan, you know, financial consultant, wealth management, you know, commercial lending. And it was started in 1904. Its revenue is 96 billion, profit is 31 billion, and now its asset is 3.2 trillion. So
and you've noticed banks are taking a big chunk of assets. It's like
yeah, I'm even sure
an insane amount of assets. Like if they're to liquidate, I think if the bank owners were to liquidate, they would have a lot of cash. You know,
and
these are people who would be bigger than Saudi Aramco and oil billionaires.
Too big, because even Saudi Aramco has to keep the money in the banks, and then even the money of Saudi Aramco still doesn't end up in the bank. And one thing that I noticed, even if you guys can see on the other video where we did why Equity is the biggest bank in Central Africa, you realize, I don't know if you, when we were talking, you notice that also when you compare with them, with how we are seeing this one, is that both of the two institutions, the Bank of America, Bank of China, asset-wise, even the Equity Bank was trying to capitalize on having $1 trillion, a trillion Kenya shilling asset base, so that it can control banks in Eastern Africa and a bit of Southern Africa. So it just shows you how, I think for a bank to be a bank, it depends on how big your assets are.
How big? Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
The bigger your assets,
and
the
also
more better.
The more better you are, and the more people will trust you, because giving a bank that doesn't have any assets, they can run away with your money. But even if you look at the revenue and the asset of something like Bank of America, the revenue is 31 billion. No, the revenue is 96 billion, but profit is 31 billion. But assets, it's almost that's 100 times, probably tens of times or more than so they're always going to, that gives you an idea of these guys can always be able to operate within the country they're operating in. And you might find something like Bank of America, these are people who have huge stake in all the companies in America, and probably they have assets all across the world. It's not just assets in America. They have bought government bonds from different governments.
Yeah, like Chinese government bonds are being bought by these banks on a crazy level.
Yeah, and you find that even these banks are loaning to other governments in other countries, and it makes them very valuable. And you might find the assets are growing because of interacting with other governments.
And
this is a bank that is playing on the government level.
Yeah, and something I'm noticing is that if people are watching, will be watching this this video, I hope people are noticing that if you want financial success, just follow what these guys are doing. Like, for example, if these banks are just showing you where the money is, even though you think banks are liquid cash, they're not depending on liquid cash. You can clearly see a bank is making 33 billion a year, but it's at asset base is 3.2 trillion. So it shows you, even when the banks get money, the first thing they do, they invest in assets, probably in land, in companies, so that because they understand that money is just paper and it can be worthless in a day. But if they were to liquidate
in a day,
and when there's a recession, assets usually appreciate. So this bank is a 3.2 trillion in asset base.
So
if there's a recession, probably the assets will be 6 trillion. That's why even people are saying the banks were involved in the 2008 financial crisis, because they wanted to to increase their
and if you look at companies are following how banks operate. Companies like Amazon, Apple, Google, they're buying up assets as well. They have, if you're pulling in a couple of billion every month, it's a good idea to buy income generating assets, so that you had that during COVID, most companies like Google and most billionaires became even richer because the assets increased in value. And that's what banks have been doing for the longest time. They buy, they accumulate money, they buy assets, and then that's how you see your money, when you keep it in a bank, it appreciates, 10, probably, a couple of percent, you gain interest every year. And you see, it's because they buy income generating assets. You might find even Bank of America owns a couple of airlines, it owns a couple of hotels, it owns a couple of farms, it owns some technology companies. And that's how you know, if you look at that's how as Africans we should be thinking about. We should be thinking about investing in assets. And you know, at the end of the day, assets are people themselves. People are the ones who do all this work to produce all this, you know, assets. And I think that's where we fail, especially in a country like Kenya. We fail to invest in income generating assets. We take more risks that are necessary than, because you know, a company like KQ, you know, it's you know, those are the companies that should not be failing. But you look at American and Chinese banks, they operate whereby they really empower their citizens to be able to produce and learn and educate themselves how to be asset generating, you know, human beings.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't think I can add anything. Just probably can do the last one, which I think everyone knows. This
The last one is
Toyota.
Toyota.
Yeah, Toyota is
in Kenya. In Kenya, we say the car ahead of you it must be a Toyota.
Yeah, it's always a Toyota.
Yeah, it's always a Toyota.
Yeah, the car in front of you is always.
And that shows how. And you know, it's funny. Japanese, it's not a very big country, but they produce cars that can navigate the landscape of Africa. You know, they can go on safaris. Land Cruiser is.
If you go to Masai Mara and if you go to Masai Mara and all these Serengeti, the car that will drive you there is 100%.
Land Cruiser. Is it 70? Yeah, and
70 series.
Is it 70 series?
Yeah, it's a 70 series.
70 series Land Cruiser.
Or the other van.
A very reliable machine.
The Toyota Hiace, the van.
Very reliable machine. Actually, in Kenya, you're recommended if you buy a first car, buy a Toyota, because it's the most mechanics know how to repair Toyotas rather than
the spare parts are readily available. Sure, the technology is not complicated. You know, Japanese and it doesn't just go to Toyota. You know, because I deal with bikes and you understand that even bikes from Japan, when you compare the Yamaha, the Suzukis, the Kawasaki's, they're easy to maintain and fix compared to European bikes like the KTM, the Ducatis. And I think it's just a Japanese, it's just a Japanese things of doing. They have their own style of doing things, and they try to make the thing affordable and reliable, you know.
And reliable. And if you look at prices, like the 2022 Range Rover, the price hiked from, you know, there's a time the Range Rover, the luxury one, it was $50,000. Now it's almost $100,000. But if you look at the Land Cruiser series, it has maintained its price all through. You know, it hasn't gone double or triple, or they haven't added too many features to the car, because, you know, they even have a 25-year warranty where if you buy a Toyota, they give you 25 years before you start doing repairs. So, and you see in Nairobi, people who buy Land Cruisers, they buy the old one. They don't buy the most recent one, because it's such a reliable machine that, you know, it keeps them at number 10 in the world. 28 billion profit. You know, that means even out of 281 revenue, 28 billion profit from selling vehicles. You know. They
just
might
vehicles.
Not be doing vehicles only, but just vehicles. Yeah, Beats. If you know,
so,
even the
so this just confirms that Toyota is the undisputed king of the road. Like,
yeah, exactly.
No, the BMWs, the Daimlers can follow, but Toyota is the king of the road. I don't think you can go any country in the world and you cannot find a Toyota. Yet,
and even tourists who come here, the first car they buy is probably a Toyota, you know, because it's so reliable. You know, fuel consumption, repairs, like you said, and you find that Japan, being a small country as it is, it's producing, you know, all the Toyotas in the world, manufacturing all of them. Even if they have other subsidiary manufacturing plants, their design is still, even 30 years. Maybe 50 years from the time they started, their design is still so basic that even if you buy a Toyota yourself, you can probably repair it yourself, even if you're in a situation like in the middle of the road. And I think that's, you know, simplicity, you know, even design, like Apple, Toyota designs for simplicity, designs for longevity and usability.
And you know, people keep asking why, you know, Japan has the largest debt in the world and the debt keep rising, but why doesn't Japan collapse? It's because of this, because Japan is not an importing country, it's a heavily exporting country. So it's hard to find the issue that a country like Kenya is facing of dollar shortage in Japan, because there's so much money coming back. You know, if Toyota, a company like Toyota, if it's not selling brand new cars, is still selling second-hand cars. You know, that's the level of business that goes in Japan. You know, guys buy the new cars and also buy the used car. So we can clearly assume that Toyota is left with no car. Even the cars that are second-hand still find a market.
They still find a market.
And this just shows how Japan mentality of doing work here is very different. And I think we need to do an episode of how Japanese, you know, manage and do business, and how, you know, they've been able to keep this generational wealth in their community. You know, these companies were started long time ago. You know, the practices that they use. How comes they've come to dominate the technology system? You remember even we were the article we are reading where Silicon Valley was supposed to be in Japan, and Japan was already making semiconductors in the 1970, 1960, but American threatened Japan with sanctions, and then Japan, the Silicon Valley kind of and manufacturing system had to be moved to America, because America was threatening, if Japan makes this thing, then we won't be buying Japanese things. We'll sanction them, and Japan
and
at that time was a weak nation.
If you look at Japan, I think the quality mindset of America comes from Japan, because aside from, you know, just manufacturing cars, Japan, everything they produce, from food to clothing to you know, shoes and everything, it's very high quality. Japanese are actually the pioneers of quality, I think, in the world, because even their food, you know, even the most successful restaurant, Nobu, he imports his raw materials from Japan. It seems like Japan, their culture of conservativeness and quality, it hits every aspect of the economy. Because even, you know, it's not that easy to get into Japan, because their culture, they're so their culture is like it's so pure, it's so reserved. And if you look at a company like Nike started importing shoes from Japan and then rebranded. You know, all these companies we see in America, they just took quality stuff from Japan and exported. Even Sony is the pioneer that pioneered a hard disk that was 1 inch, you know, those 2 inches in size, and that hard disk was used among the first iPods for Apple, and the iPhone 2G and 3G. Those are because you know, even Sony, the camera, you know, those are the spare parts that were used in the iPhone. So Japan have a high standard of quality. Being a small country, it just shows you when you agree amongst yourselves to have a standard. That standard, in the long run, it will work for you, even if it takes more time. So it's quality over quantity for Japan.
Interesting. And as I just finished, I feel like this whole experience of going through this list, you know, there are many companies, but you can't cover all of them. We just focused on covering the top 10. But for me, it just showed me that these are the sectors that if you want to start a business or invest in or something, that these are the sectors that one should think about, and not the hype on social media that you know, I'm not against Bitcoin, and we'll do an episode of cryptocurrency and stuff, but now I can understand why Warren Buffett is one of these guys are against things like Bitcoin, crypto, even though it probably is the future, but you can clearly understand, because to them they view the world in a different in a different lens. You know, they view a world of more of product exchange, you know, kind of system. You have anything to add?
I think not at the moment, but Japan, for me, it's quality over quantity, because I think if you look at even the country, they were the first people to pioneer driverless trains in the 1980s. They were the first people to farm beef to be so high quality, you know, and expensive kinds of food and harvests. And I think Japan, their culture is still very strong amongst themselves. I don't think there's a lot of external, influence in the Japanese community.
True,
and that's what makes them very strong.
They're very prideful of their culture. Anyway, I think we can just leave it there. It was a good session. Please subscribe, like, and share. We'll try and keep doing this more often, so that you can also engage and you know, share ideas. Thank you, guys. Till next time.
Next time.